Welcome to the show. Chris Graham here. We're going to talk some UVA basketball. Then we'll talk a little bit of UVA football. We'll start with basketball. The Virginia basketball team, men's basketball team, will be coming back into action tomorrow night as I'm recording this. In fact, about 24 hours away on Wednesday night with Morgan State coming to town. This is a weird time of year in a basketball schedule. November and December is a stop and start season. Virginia played 6 games in 17 days to start the season, had a week off, had 3 games in the next 7 days, 10 days off, 2 games in 4 days, another week off, and now Morgan State on Wednesday. And then now we're pretty much in the throw of things here. ACC play starts in earnest on Saturday at Notre Dame. Virginia's already got an ACC game under its belt with the win over Syracuse back earlier in the month. But yeah, this is just a stops and starts. um, the first break came after the disastrous trip down to Fort Myers. Virginia went 1-1 on the trip, but ugly loss to Wisconsin, ugly win over West Virginia. The second break came after a really good stretch of basketball, best stretch of basketball Virginia's played this year. Blowout wins over Texas A&M and Syracuse. Texas A&M was ranked 14th when Virginia beat them. Syracuse, ACC opponent, and then North Carolina Central. Then you get a break, and then the second break came ahead of an ugly win over a Northeastern team, and then a very ugly loss at Memphis, a team that then barely beat a under 500 Vanderbilt team a few days later. So here we are. Morgan State's likely not going to be much of a challenge. Ranked 343 in KenPom, 3 of its 4 wins this season, 4-10 record. 3 of the 4 wins over non-D1 opponents. Now, most recent game was the best game they've played this season, 89-75 loss to James Madison. And Morgan State actually led that game with 12:30 to go. So, yeah, they're getting better. Kevin Broadus, the head coach there, they've played two KenPom top 10 teams, lost by, I have to do some math here. They lost by 63, 122 to 59 to Arizona, and then lost by 43 to BYU. Broadus likes to play with pace, 72.7 possessions per game, which ranks 41st in the nation. The leading scorer on this team is a guy named Winston Tabbs, who transferred from ECU before that. He played at Boston College for 2 seasons, averaging 16.4 points a game. Tabbs, though, has missed the last 3 games, including that JMU game. Imagine how things could have gone if he was there. But Tabbs has missed the last 3 with an injury. I can't find any information on the nature of the injury. It's Morgan State, no offense. They're just, not a team that has a beat writer assigned to them necessarily. They're not going to have dedicated 24/7 or rivals or anything blogger or following them closely. So really hard to get information on that team. No idea if he'll be able to play tomorrow night. So there you go. I'm supposed to be previewing this game. I have no idea. I guess I could have called the coach. Feels like what I'd have to do here. But so he's the leading scorer. Maybe not playing in this game. He's missed the last 3. The 2 other leading scorers are double-digit guys. Cameron Hobbs, a 5'10" shooting guard, and 6'6" forward Will Thomas. Now, Thomas had 20 points in the loss to JMU, and a guy named Rob Lawson, who's averaging 8.3 points a game, had a pretty good one in the loss to JMU, 14.6 assists. So it's a guy that he played well in Tabbs' absence, and we'll see how that plays. Again, that team played well in his last game, and that game was against a ranked team in JMU. So that one's tomorrow night. Virginia, according to KenPom.com, should win this one by around 24 points. But Virginia was projected to beat Northeastern before the Christmas break by 17, won that game by 2. And so we know what these projections can mean at times. Virginia's really got to work on quite a few things. The slow starts, a 16-4 deficit to Northeastern, playing from behind most of that game, a 13-1 deficit to Memphis to start that one out. And, Virginia got back within 1 a couple times in the first half, but you can't keep digging yourself those holes. And this is something that's plagued this program really since the national championship season 2019. Teams, since that run have been getting off to notoriously slow starts. And it's become a little uncomfortable to see this happening over and over and over. And so that's of course, I'll do a live coverage thingy on the website tomorrow night. And of course, we'll have post-game coverage from Charlottesville. And then after tomorrow night, the tune-ups are over. It's time for ACC play. Now we'll switch over to football. A few quick news and notes. The first one I'll start with a story I wrote today for the website. I've been seeing the reports coming out of Albuquerque about the hires that Bronco Mendenhall, former Virginia coach, had been making for his new staff at New Mexico. And boy, he's getting the band back together out there. Of the 14 positions, full-time paid positions, 12 are guys that he coached with at Virginia at one point or another, guys who served on his staff at Virginia during his 6-year run in Charlottesville. So I saw a couple names. I didn't see 12 out of 14. Nick Cal, the defensive coordinator under Mendenhall, the guy that we've reported at length, extensively, etc., was the sticking point for Bronco. Apparently, he was told by Carla Williams, the AD at Virginia, to make a change at defensive coordinator after that 2021 season. Virginia's offense ranked third in the country. The defense couldn't stop anybody. That's why that team went 6-6. Hal went to Vanderbilt for a couple of years. He's now going to be the defensive coordinator at New Mexico. So Mendenhall's reconnecting there. Jason Beck, who was the quarterbacks coach at Virginia under Robert Anae, went to Syracuse, was QB coach there for a year under Anae before Anae moved to NC State. Then Jason Beck took over at Syracuse for a year as the OC. He'll be the offensive coordinator for Mendenhall. Other staff hires, the UVA Ties. This is a long list. Famika Anae, who coached under his father. He was the assistant O-line coach for a couple of seasons before moving on to a couple other jobs. He'll coach the O-line in New Mexico. Evan Butts, 4-year player at Virginia. He was on Mendenhall's staff for 2 years, then on Tony Elliott's staff for 2 years. He'll be the director of scouting under Mendenhall at New Mexico. Kirk Garner, a 4-year player at Virginia who was a grad assistant for 3 years on Mendenhall's staff. He'll be the running backs coach. Patrick Hickman, again, this is a long list. Patrick Hickman, the director of player development for 2 seasons, director of scouting for 3 seasons at Virginia under Mendenhall. He'll be the chief of staff, director of player personnel. That's not an on-field position, but important back behind the scenes role. Shane Hunter, who coached inside linebackers and safeties at Virginia under Mendenhall. He'll be the special teams coordinator at New Mexico. Matt Johns, former quarterback at Virginia, coached under Mendenhall for 1 year at UVA, then moved on to William & Mary, where he worked under Mike London for a few years. He'll be reuniting with Mendenhall at New Mexico as the tight ends coach. Charles Mack, who was a grad assistant and a scout for 3 years at Virginia under Mendenhall, 1 year under Elliott. He'll coach the DBs out there for Elliott, for Mendenhall, and under Nick Howe. Let's see. I've seen a copy editing error on my story. I've got Kirk Garner in here twice. Nick Potoshnik. Potoshnik. I'm not going to pronounce that name right at all. I'm not even close. Assistant football strength and conditioning coach on Mendenhall staff for 5 years, and then another year under Elliott. He will serve as the head athletic performance coach. So strength and conditioning will be there will be some continuity there. Joe Spaziani, you might remember that name. He was a long snapper for 3 years at Virginia. He was on Mendenhall staff for 2 years, then worked under Elliott the past 2 seasons. So he's been around for quite a while. He'll be director of operations out there in New Mexico. And then Dante Wilkins, I'm going in alphabetical order, so last but not least. 4-year player at Virginia. He was on Mendenhall staff for 3 years. He'll coach the D-line out there. So 12 of the 14 paid positions out there will be Virginia guys. And as I noted in my story, by my count, that's 12 guys on what's a 14 coach full-time staff. Mendenhall's New Mexico staff. Now, you have to say they know Virginia better than Elliott's staff. No offense, but Elliott's staff's been around for 2 years. But you add up all the years on this New Mexico staff, and they know where all the bathrooms are and everything in Charlottesville as well. So we'll be following Mendenhall and what he does out of New Mexico closely. Maybe it's too closely for some people's liking. Quick football updates continue on the transfer portal. Virginia lands a Kent State wide receiver named Trell Harris. Harris was a 2-star prep recruit out of Illinois, played at 2 years at Kent State, had 39 catches in his 2 seasons there. He was on a field for a total of 758 offensive snaps. He had offers from Minnesota, Pitt, Michigan State, West Virginia, Vanderbilt. Another guy in the mix to replace Malik Washington, 110 catches, 1,426 yards, bonkers numbers in 2023, the one season that we had Malik. Um, Tony Elliott will be trying to rebuild that wide receiver core around Malachi Fields, who's returning 58 catches, 811 yards in 2023. The other guys off the portal that have been added that Virginia will be putting in the mix here. It's a veteran group. You gotta like what they've done. In addition to Trell Harris, you got Chris Tyree from Notre Dame, 82 catches in parts of 4 seasons with the Irish, and a former four-star prep recruit, Andre Green from North Carolina. Didn't get a lot of field time at North Carolina, but guy with a lot of prowess that just couldn't get through the crowded wide receiver room down in UNC. And also grad transfer tight end from Harvard, Tyler Neville. Virginia really hadn't used the tight end position very much in its offense the last couple of years, and Neville, a pass catching tight end, will give them an option there. Um, those are some recruiting news and notes off the transfer portal. We had a story about Elliott addressing the QB situation heading into the spring. Basically, Tony Muskett, it appears, will be part of the program, as we've been speculating, just based on the fact that Muskett hadn't put his name in the transfer portal yet, and it's getting close to the end of the year. The transfer portal's been open for more than 3 weeks now. It's an interesting quandary because Elliott has talked about the need to address the quarterback situation by adding more depth to that room. He didn't sign any quarterbacks in the early signing period for the prep signing class that was finalized last week. There's still another February signing date, and I'm sure the staff and Tony's talked about how he needs to find players across the board from the prep ranks. They'll try to address the quarterback situation there. The third stringer, nothing against Grady Brosserhouse, but he's a walk-on. You'd like to have a third string guy that, just in case there's a lot of injuries at quarterback. We had a season this year where Tony Muskett missed quite a few games. He was the QB1 coming out of camp, and that pressed the true freshman Anthony Collinger into action. It's a great situation and also a tough one. It's a great situation because Tony has two guys that have proven they can start a quarterback and win games in the ACC. On the other side of that, having two guys who have the run that Calandria and Muskett have makes it hard to recruit anybody else to come in, at least right away off the transfer portal. And that's probably where you're going to pick up a guy that could be your QB3. That's going to be a challenge. And Tony Elliott talked about that challenge last week as he talked about his recruiting. We'll have more recruiting stories coming up on the website this week. We'll go in depth on the offensive line, defensive line, and what's coming back, which and the additions off the portal in both areas, really key areas. Obviously, we pay attention when we watch the games to the skilled players, the quarterback, the receivers. That's where your focus is as a fan. But the game's one of the trenches, and so we'll go in depth in the trenches and try to share what Virginia will have coming into next year. Actually, the more I look at this roster, cautiously optimistic that there could be some improvement in Virginia football looking ahead to 2024. Because we wrote a column. I wrote a column last week about how the biggest job that Tony Elliott did. He didn't recruit great at the preps this year. 15th in the ACC, 75th, I think it was, overall nationally. Bottom 5 among all the Power Fives this season in prep recruiting. But there have been some nice additions off the portal. We highlighted some of those just a minute or two ago. But also just keeping so many of the key guys in-house. In fact, I wrote about 8 guys that Virginia could not afford to lose, guys off the current roster they could not afford to lose. None of those guys are going. So that's a big key. That'll be a big key to build around for Elliott and his staff going into the spring and then into next fall. So we'll have more about that in the coming days. Also, of course, again, tomorrow night, Virginia hosting Morgan State in basketball, the final non-conference tune-up for the soon-to-be grind of the ACC, which really tips off in earnest on Saturday with a game at Notre Dame. We'll have coverage of Morgan State tomorrow night and then get you ready for Notre Dame coming up on the weekend. Hey, if you have any questions, any comments for me, any news tips for me, any topics you want me to address in a future podcast, please reach out to me at chris@augustafreepress.com.